What's going on, everyone? Welcome into a brand new hour of CBS Sports HQ, presented by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Make every moment more. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, alongside the one and only Tommy Tran. Tommy, we have finally made it. It has been a long time coming. NFL regular season in the books. We got the playoff picture behind us, and there was a lot of scenarios we were waiting to see how things would work out. Broncos are in, Bengals, Dolphins out, and when it comes to the NFC, that 1 seed belongs to Detroit.
Yeah, we're finally getting a little bit of clarity after Week 18. We have 2 playoff games on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and then a Monday nighter. So again, here's how the playoff bracket looks. CBS will have 2 games in the AFC, by the way. Chargers and Texans on Saturday afternoon, and then Broncos and Bills on Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern. So that is how it lays out. It is bracket season. A reminder, the highest seeded team in each conference guaranteed to play the lowest seeded advancing team from the wild card round. We ended the regular season with a historic matchup in the NFC North. Lions beat the Vikings, and it was the first regular season meeting between 13 or more win teams. Jahmyr Gibbs was the star of the night, ending up with 4 total touchdowns in the 31-9 victory. Detroit gets a much-needed extra rest, while Minnesota has to travel to L.A. in the wild-card round.
All right, let's go to the NFC South, where the Bucs controlled their own destiny. And for the first half, Tommy, it looked a little dicey, like maybe they weren't going to win the division. But they did it. The Bucs come away with a win, 27-19 over the Saints. Mike Evans, shout out his 11th straight season there with 100, oh my God, I said 100 receiving yards. I'm sorry, Mike Evans, 1,000 receiving yards. The Bucs punch their tickets to the playoff for the 5th time in franchise history, win the division for the 4th straight season.
And it was the way that he got it. All right, Broncos are in the postseason for the first time since winning Super Bowl 50 in 2015. Denver secured the NFL's final wildcard spot by beating the rested Chiefs in Week 18. Bo Nix, 26 for 29, setting franchise record for completion percentage and most completions to start a game, which was 18. Again, Broncos at the Bills in the wildcard round.
Tommy, I find it hard to believe that the Chiefs could not score one singular point, because we know the Dolphins lost. They were just like, we don't want to see a hot Joe Burrow and the Bengals in the playoffs. We're just going to sit back and relax and let the Broncos make their way in.
There was a little bit of conspiracy theory going on in terms of what the motivations for Kansas City was. By the way, Lions, in terms of Super Bowl odds, they are the betting favorite at 3-1, followed by the 2-time champs at plus 350. Just off the board here, Texans, Steelers, and Broncos have the longest odds to win the Super Bowl at 65-1. So let's break things down, and we've got our guys, Kyle Long and Leger Douzable. They're going to ping-pong back and forth with all of the teams that are in the dance. Kyle, I'm going to start with you here. The 2-time champs are 2 wins away of getting back to the Super Bowl, and once again, the road to New Orleans goes through Arrowhead in the AFC.
Yeah, and it's just the way that they won it in Kansas City. They've seen this time and time again under Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes. And I just think it's important to point out this is as experienced as there is a football team in the National Football League when it comes to playoffs, when it comes to making your Super Bowl run. The offense, they were clicking at the end of the season, in large part due to the fact that they've been getting healthy. You know, Mahomes gets that week off. His ankle gets better. Chris Jones has been an absolute dominator in the playoffs. He gets rested for another one. And then his playoff buddy on the other side of the ball, Super Bowl champion a couple times, Travis Kelce, he's had historic runs in the playoffs. So an opportunity to come off of that bye this past week for a lot of those superstars is going to be huge for the Chiefs. And as I said before, their experience, so pump the brakes on any of this. Resting is bad talk.
So let's get to the 2 teams that have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. Deuce, the Bills, frontrunner Josh Allen in search of some postseason success. How do they get there?
Yeah, they have to ride the train that they've been riding, which is Josh Allen. And to your point, Tommy, they've really struggled in the playoffs the last few years, being bounced out in the divisional round in 3 straight years. Matter of fact, last year to the Kansas City Chiefs, who are their nemesis. They have to play better defense first and foremost. This defense has really struggled the last couple of weeks, have had problems getting after the quarterback. They need to be able to do that. And then Josh Allen just needs to continue to be Josh Allen. Continue to spread the football around, get James Cook involved, and then in the red zone, get Josh Allen's legs involved. To me, Kyle, he is the most dangerous player in NFL history in the red zone. When you talk about somebody being 6'5", 6'6", 240, upwards to 50 pounds, he is hard to bring down in the open field. So the Bills need to continue to ride the Josh Allen train. He's elevated them during the regular season. Now let's see if he can do it in the playoffs.
Kyle, on the flip side, how does Bo Nix and the Broncos make some noise in the postseason, you think?
Well, you got to go and utilize the things that have been strengths for your football team. And in my opinion, the offensive line has played really well. They knew the task of having a rookie quarterback. They needed to keep the vision clear for him. It's been fantastic all year. And I love those Broncos throwback uniforms. It reminds me of a time when the Broncos were really successful. And that's kind of the vibe they're getting in Denver right now. They have had a great season with Sean Payton, and this guy, Bo Nix, has been fantastic. I think about the way that their defense plays. They get after quarterbacks. They frustrate offensive linemen. They've got a real winner on the edge with Benito. Zach Allen on the inside is another guy that can win at any given time. I feel like this team is just riding a high. They need to stay on schedule offensively. And again, I talked about experience with Kansas City. Sean Payton has a lot of experience. Calm and confidence permeates that building because of Sean.
Let's get to Ravens and Steelers again. Dews, how do the Ravens' run game look different now with Derrick Henry in the fold?
First and foremost, Tommy, they can't forget that they have Derrick Henry because they did that last year in the AFC Championship game. This is a guy that had over 1,900 yards. And Kyle can speak to this. When you have a guy that is as big and as fast as Derrick Henry, it weighs on you on defense, right? I can speak from experience. The thing about Derrick Henry, if it's not working early in the game, Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator, don't go away from it. Continue to run the ball with Derrick Henry. We just saw in this past weekend's game versus the Cleveland Browns, they kind of stymied him in the first half. And then before you know it, right, Kyle, a 20-yard gain, a 30-yard gain, and then body blows, 5 yards here, 4 yards there. They have to be consistent in running the ball, which they didn't do last year in the AFC Championship game, and it cost them versus the Kansas City Chiefs. I know this year Todd Monken will lean on Derrick Henry because he's been the ultimate closer for them this season.
Kyle, how do the Steelers look more like the 10-win team that we saw this year and less like the 4 straight losses coming into the postseason?
Well, it's funny you say that, Tommy. It's like they peaked too soon. And I remember playing with Andy Reid on the Chiefs, and he would always say, don't peak too soon. It's the same thing Matt Nagy used to tell us, don't peak too soon. It doesn't mean like we don't want your best until it matters. We want your best all the time. But for this Steelers team, we've seen it time and time again. They have a big burst at some point in the season, and then seemingly the embers, they stop burning orange in the playoffs, right around the playoffs. So for this team, the only recipe for success is if those leaders corral George Pickens, both sides of the ball. I want leadership on both sides of the ball and make him understand that he is so talented. And if he is not going to be productive, the last thing he can do is be counterproductive. Drops, explosions mentally. We need to have this guy locked in because you are our only chance offensively. When we are at our best, you are at your best. And that falls on the leadership, whether it be the coaching staff or the leaders that are putting on a helmet every Sunday.
Let's get to Texans and Chargers. Dudes, I'm going to give you Houston. If you win the division, you get a home playoff game, and yet you're underdogs. Hey, if you're D'Amico Ryan, certainly time to play the disrespected card if you want.
Yeah, without a doubt. First and foremost, I got to get this offense going. I thought it was telling and important that the Houston Texans trotted out their starting offense last week, even though that game essentially didn't mean anything. I liken it to a jump shooter, Kyle, right? You go 1 for 7 in the game. Sometimes you just need that first basket to go through. And for C.J. Stroud, he was perfect last week, 6 for 6, 50 yards, and a touchdown to his number 1 receiver, Nico Collins, and then they got them out of the game. I think they needed that from a confidence standpoint because the offense had looked abysmal the last couple of weeks. The Texans had been led by its defense, but during the playoff times, you got to play complementary football. They haven't been doing that the last few weeks. First and foremost, Tommy, they got to get Joe Mixon going. In games where he gets going and is the focal point of the offense, they win those games. In games that they don't, they lose those games. So I thought it was important that not only did they get Joe Mixon going in the run game last week for that one series, but also C.J. Stroud in the offense because they have really struggled the last couple of weeks. Again, this team has been led by its defense. They have a defensive-minded coach, but that offense has to get going again if they have a chance to beat the Chargers. You talked about it. Being home dogs, that's disrespectful. I'm sure D'Amico Ryans will use that as bulletin board material this week.
Kyle, on the flip side, Jim Harbaugh reminding us of his NFL pedigree. What's going to be needed here for his Bolts team in the postseason?
Well, I just want fans to understand they've already accomplished everything that they could have imagined with this new look roster, brand new head coach and Jim Harbaugh, Justin Herbert being revitalized again. Well, really, he was never done. He's been revitalized his whole career. But I think that it comes down to which identity that this Chargers offense wants to bring to the playoffs. So they got to say, we're going to ride the shoulders of Justin Herbert, who's fantastic off schedule. His arm talent makes it so when the coverage breaks down, he can extend plays and make any throw on the football field? Or are they going to try to match wits with the offensive and defensive lines of the Houston Texans? Are they going to try to run the football, establish that run that we saw early in the season, take the ball out of Herbert's hands and then rely on him when it matters? I'm of the thought process that Jim Harbaugh is one of those guys that says all we need is a suit and an invitation, and that's to the dance. And once you're at the dance, anything can happen. I like the way this team's constructed, and obviously big fan of Justin Herbert as well.
Chargers and Texans, by the way, when Houston makes the postseason, they are locked into that first Saturday game in the wild card round. It's tradition, guys. That's how it usually works out in the NFL. Let's move to the NFC. Dudes, I'm going to give you the Detroit Lions. We saw what they were able to do last night. Aaron Glenn certainly in his bag. Those injuries are still a concern. How much of a concern is it still for you?
Tommy, you know, I've been on this bandwagon where I've been telling everybody to have patience and don't panic when it comes to the Detroit Lions. I know they've had a bunch of injuries on that defensive side, but you talked about it, Tommy. Aaron Glenn was in his bag. That was a masterclass last week yesterday versus the Minnesota Vikings. The way he was showing pressure and then dropping out in coverage, and even when the Minnesota Vikings tried to use that short motion with Justin Jefferson, you're thinking it's man coverage. Well, we're dropping out in zone, and it was almost like Sam Darnold reverted back to when he was a Jets quarterback playing the New England Patriots. He started seeing ghosts. Love what I saw from Zadarius Smith rushing off the edge. Alex Anzalone brought the spirit and fight back to this defense. I love what I've seen from them. And you know I've been on record saying that this offense can go toe-to-toe with anybody. I mean, in the month of December, they averaged 37.5 points per game. So the way that defense played yesterday, and yes, Terrion Arnold is a concern, him going out, but they could potentially get Carlton Davis back. So we still have not seen the best Detroit Lions defense, right? Because they could get some pieces back. I think right now they're the favorites to win the NFC.
All right, let's get to the matchups. Got to be right, and we got to be tight. A rematch of Brazil. We got Eagles and Packers. Kyle, you've got the Philly angle.
Well, they've got everything they want in a roster when it comes to playoff time. You got a dual threat quarterback. You got two legit winners on the outside. Obviously, this team is constructed up front with tremendous players at both tackle positions, man-eaters at the guard, and a real ass kicker at center. So I like their chances on the road or at home. Luckily, they're at home against the Packers. I just feel like this is a really good spot for Vic Fangio to get his defense back dialed in. We saw some hiccups there towards the end of the season, but they got a week off. I really feel like he's one of the best big game defensive coordinators in football, and that's going to be a matchup to watch with the coordinator on the other sideline. But, you know, with the way the Eagles finished and the way that the Packers finished, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this Eagles team go out there confidently.
Dudes, where are you at with Green Bay?
Yeah, Tommy, we talked about this a little bit on the pregame show yesterday. I believe the Green Bay Packers are in an identity crisis and trying to figure out who they are on offense. Are they a team that's led by the focal point of Josh Jacobs in the backfield and winning with physicality? Or do they put the game in Jordan Love's hand? And I talked about this on the pregame show yesterday, Tommy. I thought it would have been good to try to get Jordan Love in a rhythm early, but unfortunately, he ends up hurting his elbow and has to come out of the game, and it didn't look good while he was in the game. So there's some concerns if you're the Green Bay Packers, because when you look at the totality of their season, 1-5 in the NFC North, and yes, that's the hardest division in football, but those are the caliber teams you're going to be playing in the playoffs. They only beat 2 playoff caliber teams during the regular season. So I still think the Packers are trying to figure out who they are exactly on offense. Is it a blend of Josh Jacobs being the focal point and Jordan Love? Or is Jordan Love going to lead the team and then you use Josh Jacobs as a change-up to the offense? I think that's the biggest issue with the Packers going in, and they need to figure that out before they play the Philadelphia Eagles.
By the way, rematches are a theme on this half of the bracket. We have Bucks and Commanders. Kyle, Tampa Bay, what are the chances this Bucks team can do what they did last year, was beat an NFC East team at home and make some noise in the postseason?
Well, I have the feeling this is a team of destiny. And, you watch Mike Evans get his catch there in a 4-minute situation. And I know there was retired NFL coaches all around the country going, what the hell are they doing? I wouldn't have done that. Put the season in jeopardy, throwing the ball to Mike Evans, getting your... That's just the way that Baker Mayfield runs the show. That's the way that Liam Cohen has had fun and empowered his players this entire season. They dealt with big injury after big injury on the offensive side of the ball. But the one thing that has remained has been this offensive line, has been the confidence they have in number 6, Baker Mayfield, who has had a real renaissance. He's been unbelievable to watch, so much fun. This is the team that I feel like nobody in the NFL, people talk about the Bengals. We hope the Bengals don't get into the playoffs. This has always been the team that you didn't want to get into the playoffs because Baker Mayfield's a gamer and he's got a bunch of studs coming with him.
Dudes, much like Bo Nix in the AFC, Jaden Daniels in the NFC with his Commanders team.
Yeah, Tom, he's been unconscious. If the game is in jeopardy at the end, he's a guy that's willing and able to elevate and lift his team to victories. We saw that many times this year, whether it's the Bengals game where he scores every drive. We saw it versus the Atlanta Falcons in overtime, taking the ball down, getting it first, and winning that game in overtime. To me, the biggest thing for the Commanders, they got to get Brian Robinson going in the run game to take some of this pressure off Jaden Daniels. Again, he is a guy that is unconscious and can handle that type of pressure, but take some off of him. Anytime Brian Robinson has a good day, usually Jaden Daniels has a good day. It'll also open things up for him to use his mobility as well. They got to get Brian Robinson going in the playoffs.
Last but not least, we get Vikings and Rams. Kyle, how do you come back and bounce back from that Sunday nighter?
I don't know what the hell I feel about any of this anymore, Tommy, because just this past week I was trying to convince Leger, old big brain Leger, who's been adamant about the Detroit Lions. He said, Kyle, you're just wrong about this Vikings game. And it was my best bet, and I lost it. I won best bets, but I cried myself to sleep last night because Sam Darnold, this Vikings offense, they just failed to arrive in the red zone. Clearly, we needed to, Kevin O'Connell and this offense should just get down in the tight red, and that's the practice they should do. And you know what? I would say this, they deserve the path that they are going. They have earned and deserve the path that they're going to have to go through to get to the Super Bowl if they do. It's a tough one. The Detroit Lions are on the other side of it. And I just say this, some teams swear by these losses at the end of the season and say that they needed it before the playoffs. Let's just hope that Kevin O'Connell can spin zone it that way with his locker room, because it was brutal to watch that Minnesota Vikings team limp across the finish line in Week 18.
And dudes, on the flip side, for Sean McVay and the Rams, back-to-back years slow starts, back-to-back years in the postseason.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how they finished down the stretch. They got to get Cooper Kupp going, though, Tommy. If you look at what he's done in his last 6 games, only 2 games has he eclipsed over 60 yards receiving, and he had a goose egg versus San Francisco 49ers. So he's a guy, if they want to make a subsequent run in the playoffs, they got to get the best out of him. Puka Nacua has still played well since coming back from injury. Kyron Williams has been steady Eddie. That third piece of that offense, that triangle offense, is Cooper Kupp. They got to get him going if they want to go on a run in the playoffs.
Great stuff, guys. It's a look at the bracket with Leger Douzable and Kyle Long right here on HQ. More of that stuff on Pushing the Pile with Kyle and Mike Renner. Dooz, a regular guest on that show 4 times a week, maybe even more the postseason. Scan the QR code or check them out on YouTube.